Two winter storms are likely in the United States over the next week, and one of these could be a rare winter storm that impacts areas like Texas and Oklahoma, back along the Gulf Coast, and even into the southeast, where there could be some snow and perhaps even ice accumulation as we go into early next week. And brace yourself for some of the coldest weather that we've seen in years east of the Rocky Mountains as we go into next week, as a big Arctic blast is coming to the United States. So in today's forecast, we're going to be breaking down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 10 days. And we'll begin with what's happening across the country right now. And for the most part, we're pretty quiet. A lot of sunshine out there across the country. There are a couple areas, though, of moisture and as well as cloud cover that are beginning to build. One of which is back over in Texas, and then we have another one in the Midwest. And as we go into tonight and into tomorrow morning, these air masses are going to collide, and we are eventually going to see a big storm form as we go into tomorrow across the deep south and into the Ohio Valley, where there will be a potential for some snow and even some rain. And then eventually, as we go into Sunday, this will move into the northeast, and then we could have another winter weather event take place back over in the northeast on Sunday, before eventually a large Arctic blast moves into the United States, bringing the coldest weather that we've seen possibly in years for much of the country. Now, a dramatic shift in the weather pattern is expected over the next several days, as we are expecting a huge Arctic blast, and as well as the potential for multiple different winter weather events and perhaps even some winter storms. So let's begin with what the jet stream looks like, because this is going to be really one of the biggest reasons why we are going to be seeing the weather pattern that we're going to be seeing. This is what it looks like as we go later into today and eventually into tomorrow. Our jet stream is overall relatively zonal here in the southern tier of the country. This is our subtropical jet stream, and then our polar jet stream is beginning to dip back over in the northern plains, and that is where all this Arctic air is going to be coming out of, is a northerly flow in the jet stream, which again are the upper level winds that are going to be steering tons of cold air out of Canada, moving into the northern and central plains. On the other hand, we're going to have a low pressure system moving across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, and this will bring the threat for some snowfall and even some showers and thunderstorms as we go into Saturday and as well as into Sunday. Eventually, as we go into Sunday and then eventually into Monday, we are going to have an expansive area of northwesterly flow across the Rocky Mountains and the northern plains, which is going to feed in tons of Arctic air into the United States, which will set up the coldest weather pattern that we've seen all year long so far, and really the coldest weather that we've really seen in at least a couple of years for much of the United States. And eventually, as we go into early next week, that is when we think there's a chance for a winter storm back over along the Gulf Coast or in the southeast. The chances of this continue to rise. We're up near 50 to 60% now on there being a winter storm, and there's at least a 70 to 80% chance that we will see some sort of wintry precipitation somewhere along the Gulf Coast or even into southeast Texas, which is a very rare event, by the way. We do not see that very often, and this is what it looks like as we go into Tuesday and into Wednesday. So we should have a little trough that moves here across the southern tier of the United States, and we should have enough moisture in this area for at least some level of precipitation, which even if we get a little bit of precipitation, it will likely be in the form of wintry precipitation due to how cold it is going to be. With the larger weather pattern in mind, let's zoom in more to these winter storms that we are expecting over the next week or so, and we're going to begin by using the GFS ensembles, which basically incorporates a bunch of different computer models all into one single run, which gives us a better idea of what we could be talking about here over the next several days. So we'll begin with what's happening this weekend. We are expecting some snowfall across areas near the Great Lakes, mainly from Ohio back into New York, and eventually this will move into New England as we eventually go later into the day on Saturday. And then eventually, as we go into Sunday morning, we may see another shot of snow back over in the northeast. Some of the short-term computer models are not nearly as confident with this, but there is a chance if things do progress here over the next 24 hours with a low pressure system that is just a tad closer to New England, we actually could see a more significant winter weather event as we go into Sunday across areas like southern New England and even back over near Maryland. Eventually, as we go into Monday, that's when things start to get very interesting. Late Monday and into early Tuesday, we are expecting at least some light wintry precipitation back over in the southern plains, where there will be a potential for both snow, sleet, and maybe even some freezing rain as well, which could lead to ice accumulation. Now, I do want to point out in this scenario that this is a very confined area. It's not very large or widespread, and it's overall very light wintry precipitation, but I'll show you a scenario in just a couple of minutes, and I'll show you a better idea of what we could have on a higher end scenario, meaning maybe a more significant winter weather event with several inches of snow and as well as freezing rain. But this is what happens as we go into Tuesday morning, according to the GFS ensembles. It shows a much more widespread area of snowfall from the Carolinas back along the Gulf Coast through Texas, a little bit of freezing rain and sleet also being possible. Look how far south, by the way, this winter precipitation is. It's all the way down near Florida, which, by the way, is very possible next week week because we're going to have a huge Arctic air mass that is going to be ushering in tons of cold weather. So our freezing line Tuesday morning will actually be as far south as northern Florida. And by the way, I'm not ruling out some winter precipitation in Florida on Tuesday. Eventually, as we go into Tuesday afternoon, this continues to grow in size, especially back over near Georgia and even into the Florida Panhandle. And then eventually, as we go into Wednesday morning, this will continue to shift to the east. Eventually, we're done with this, I think, by Wednesday afternoon and evening. But this does appear as if it is going to likely be a multi-day event that begins late Monday night and runs all the way through Wednesday. And then a higher end scenario for this winter storm would be something like the Canadian ensemble members are showing, which shows again some snow in the northeast in the Ohio Valley tomorrow, and then eventually a resparking of another winter storm as we go into Sunday across areas in the northeast, including New York and New England, where there could be some areas around 4 to 8 inches of snow if this ends up happening, if we get enough moisture and we get a new low pressure center to form. But it shows a much more aggressive approach to this upcoming winter storm. It shows as we go into Tuesday morning, we could have a widespread area of light to moderate snowfall and even some sleet and freezing rain back over in much of Texas, and then eventually this expands and grows in size as we go into late Tuesday across the Gulf Coast and into the southeast as a much larger winter storm. And this is obviously going to cause much more significant travel impacts and also impacts in general across much of the southeast, including areas even as far south as Florida, where we could even see some freezing rain maybe in parts of northern Florida, which again never really happens. So this would be very rare if we end up seeing something like this, and then eventually moves towards the east coast as we go later into Wednesday. Now that we've laid out the details, this is what I think will happen. So this is the GFS model as we go into Saturday. We are expecting some light, moderate, and even at times heavy snow back over in areas like Pennsylvania and New York. As we go really late into Saturday, this will move into New England and kind of fizzle out. As we go into Sunday, we should have more moisture that builds up, and we will likely end up seeing another area of snow across areas like Maryland back into New England, where we could see several inches of snow and perhaps even whiteout conditions at times as we go late into Sunday night. And then eventually into Monday, I think things stay dry for most of Monday. Then as we go into Tuesday morning, I do think we're going to start to see some snow and freezing rain developing near the Gulf Coast. Now, I do want to point out that this is really what I'm leaning towards right now. I think that this will be a winter weather event near and along the Gulf Coast, but I don't think it's going to be as large as the Canadian ensembles, for example, were showing just a moment ago. But I do think we are going to see some areas of light to moderate snowfall and even some light freezing rain, which even the lightest bit of freezing rain will lead to ice accumulation, which would lead to travel impacts because there's no equipment to really salt the roadways, for example, across areas like Florida if we end up seeing freezing rain in Florida. So just keep that in mind. We would basically see significant travel impacts almost no matter what. As we go late into Tuesday, this continues to move to the east, snow being possible even as far south as Florida, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and then eventually into Wednesday, this moves offshore. Now, exactly where the snow falls, how heavy it is, and also where we see freezing rain and how significant that is, all remain up in the air. We could see the system shift more to the north over the next couple of days, could shift south, which if it shifted any further south, Orlando, Florida, get ready. We could have snow on the ground and sleds going down the hill with not even some snowflakes on the ground. So, anything's possible. Obviously, I don't think we're going to see snow in Orlando, Florida, but, you got the idea here. This is definitely going to be something that we need to watch for over the next few days. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as we are going to continue to have daily updates on this potential winter storm threat here in the southern plains and the southeast. And again, this is a very rare sort of storm. We don't usually see winter weather events this far down to the south. It's really a once every 4 to 5 year sort of event, maybe even more rare than that, depending on if this does shift further south. And as we track this winter system next week, it's important to note that many areas could see over an inch of snowfall, which would be considered significant even as far south as areas like the Gulf Coast. And these are the probabilities right now through Wednesday of next week. And notice that the swath here, areas like southeast Texas through Louisiana and Mississippi, those are where we have the greatest probabilities of seeing over an inch of snowfall at around a 60% chance right now. The probabilities are a bit lower elsewhere because confidence just isn't there yet that we are definitely going to be seeing a potential winter storm here. But areas like Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, even back through North Carolina should be on alert here that there is going to be a potential for over an inch of snowfall. Again, it's not certain at this point, but the probabilities are increasing. And I just want to mention that this winter weather event this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, overall a few inches of snow is expected in the northeast, but what will likely be more significant is what we're looking at as we go into Sunday with a little offshore disturbance that'll try to form just off the coast of New England. If that does form, I think a more significant area of snow will be possible in southern New England, back through even like Boston, for example, with a widespread 4 to 8 inches of snow, and a few locations could be over 8 inches of snow if we do indeed see that winter weather event take place on Sunday. It is still a little uncertain, but confidence is growing, so definitely be ready for that if you're back over in southern New England. And before that winter weather event happens next week, we are expecting some of the coldest weather in years for much of the United States, especially east of the Rocky Mountains. And this will all begin Saturday into Sunday, where a strong cold front will move up and down the East Coast and back towards the Gulf Coast, with the coldest of that weather being in the northern plains in the Midwest, and some areas could be as much as 50 degrees below average as we go into Saturday and as well as into Sunday morning. And then eventually as we go into Monday into Tuesday, this cold air just continues to expand across the Great Plains and throughout the East Coast, with the coldest of that air being over in the northern plains, where we could have some wind chills as low as negative 50 degrees. It is going to be downright frigid. Make sure you're bundling up if you go outdoors to avoid any sort of frostbite. And then eventually as we go into late Tuesday into Wednesday, this starts to shift towards the East Coast, where cold air will continue to build, and then all of a sudden it's going to be right back to around or above average temperatures in the northern plains by Wednesday. So we're just going to have a complete flip of the script as we go into the early to mid portion of the week. But eventually as we go into late next week, another big area of cold air will build. This will not be as intense as the one that we're looking at early this upcoming week, but it will still bring some cold weather to much of the country. And one of the reasons why there could be a winter storm down along the Gulf Coast is because of how cold it is going to be on Monday. This is Monday morning. Freezing temperatures reaching all the way down towards the Gulf Coast, sub-zero temperatures filling in the Midwest and even the northern plains. And by Tuesday morning, that will only continue to increase in coverage as below freezing temperatures are expected for almost the entire country. But one area that's going to be, again, downright frigid is the northern plains, including Minnesota, where many areas will be as low as negative 25 degrees for an actual temperature. With wind, it'll feel as low as 50 degrees below zero. And just a reminder, our 750,000 subscriber merch is only available for a few more days at shopmaxvelocity.net. That is the top link in the description below. We still have t-shirts, hats, and as well as stickers. Again, go check this out. Top link in the description below or shopmaxvelocity.net. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.